and welcome to another career conversation session, viSHEbility, where of course we explore careers, we showcase what Black women are doing and the spaces they're occupying, and also just celebrate their achievements, their tenacity, and just hopefully gain some really good knowledge and wisdom, both about what they're doing in their work, but also how we can, become them, as the case may be, how we can be inspired by them. And today we have a really great guest, Danielle, who's a member of the tribe. I'm really excited to get into a conversation with her. She's an analyst at Bernstein, covering global metals and mining with a special interest in environmental, social, and governance issues. Prior to Bernstein, she was an analyst at Macquarie, also covering the mining space. She's also done a stint as a manager of investment research at the World Platinum Investment Council. And before that, she spent a good amount of years, 9 years at UBS, also in the metals and mining research space. And Danielle has a degree in psychology, so definitely not finance. So I'll definitely love to get into that, from the University of Warwick. So welcome to viSHEbility Career Conversations, Danielle. It's really exciting to have you here.
Well, thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone. I'm just happy to get into an interesting conversation, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited. And so for those who have not joined any one of our events before, welcome. Really quick intro. So my name is Mary at EMEA. I am the founder of viSHEbility, and we are a social first organization that is really passionate about improving the outcomes for Black women in the marketplace through inspiration, coaching, and community. This is one of our community events. In fact, it's kind of our community and inspiration events. And so our whole thing is really about, it's less likely that you can be it if you haven't seen it, and just being able to identify just women who are just pushing through in various spheres, putting them in front of you, and maybe hopefully you can use that to kind of, think about what elements of their journey resonate with you and can give you some inspiration, but also to also explore like potential careers that you may not have even thought about, and maybe that just opens up a whole new door for you. So that's really the reason why we do this. So let's get into it. And if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to type it in the chat room and I'll pick it up as we go. We are all amongst friends. This is going to be super chill and casual as we usually do. Okay. Are we ready to go? Let's go. Let's do it. Okay, perfect. Yes. So Danielle, before we get into like academia, work, all of the whole thing about your journey, I definitely want to give our people like the opportunity to just get to know you a little bit more. So I'm going to ask you a few kind of not really quick fire questions, but just just something to break the ice.
Sure.
So what would you say is something that people, I don't know, most people don't know you here, but what would you say some people never know about you, or when they, let me phrase it this way. What would you say is something that people always assume incorrectly about you?
That's so interesting. Yeah, I guess on at the surface, especially now at this big age, we were talking earlier that we feel quite old, but at 35 now, I think I come across, especially in a professional setting, as like really confident and super put together. Especially in terms of expressing what I think, because that's essentially my job, right? My job is to give my opinion. And so I think that people assume that confidence comes naturally. And actually, it's been quite the reverse. Right? I was naturally a very shy child. And even up to now, when I have like an unfamiliar professional event, I get quite nervous. But it's not always obvious. And I think that I've learned to just live with that nervousness, that anxiety, and just enter the mode of displaying the confidence when you don't feel it. In fact, even to get a little bit personal, my husband and I were arguing about this the other day because my career is so important to me. I'm always talking about my career, and I was talking about some of the struggles that I've had over the past few months. And so he's very well aware of like what my issues are and stuff like that. But he said that, oh, but you always come across as so confident and that you know exactly what you're doing, you know. And this is for somebody who sees me, you know, no makeup, in my bonnet and whatever, crying on a Sunday night, like sees all of the ugly sides.
Yeah, and he still
but
thinks
even
you're confident and bossing it.
he still thinks I'm confident. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's an incorrect assumption. But it also, in a way, you could argue that it demonstrates that, you know, you're in a lot of control in terms of the way in which you come across.
Yeah.
You know, and so because so much of my role is about saying what your opinion is and delivering it with conviction, and like you've assessed all of the possibilities, and this is the only way that it can possibly go, right? That's the way in which people communicate in my role. It shows that you can really grow into that to the point where it's almost automatic, even if that's not how you feel, you know. So I think that's probably the biggest thing.
I love it. I always say, like, show up, you know, when we say like fake it till you make it, I'm just like, just show up till you make it. Like just come however way you want to come, just come. The showing up is what matters. But I like that. Well, you've thrown us into this whole confidence thing very, very early. Okay, cool. I made notes. We'll come back.
Wonderful.
What makes you laugh out loud?
I think real life is hilarious. Always, I think real life is funnier than comedy, you know. So just the everyday things that happen in life. Like between the two of us, my husband is like the least serious of us. I'm naturally fairly serious. I was the serious 5-year-old, right? So I'm naturally fairly serious, and so he makes me laugh all the time. Just, you know, the funny situations that people get themselves in. So yeah.
Everyday life makes you laugh. What was your favorite thing to do as a child?
It sounds boring, but I was a real bookworm as a child.
Me too.
I was and is still a bookworm. So like in my secondary school, I went to a comprehensive school in Hackney. I was born and raised in Hackney. And so it was like mixed ability, right? And so in school you were either a like bookworm or you were athletic. You know, you there was no way you could be both. It wasn't acceptable. It was one or the other. Yeah. And I was definitely a bookworm, like studious type. Yeah, and also into a lot of music as well. Like played musical instruments growing up, and still play actually to an extent. So yeah, that's what I like to do.
Yeah, it's amazing how we get fit into buckets really early, right? Like, yeah, it's really, really amazing. It's like, even like with thinking, that made me think back to like my time in school and being yeah, like top of class, prefect, whatever, but I was also like an athlete, and you know, home economics, and I did like kind of the range of things, and also threw like some of the best parties in my time as well.
Now look at you.
I was like, okay, like, you know, so I was all about like going out and like doing stuff and being social, but yeah, like I would never fail an exam. It just would never happen. But yeah, like, but you know, it was always that thing of you either were part of the party group or you were part of the bookworm thing. So I never felt like I fit into any of the groups, but interesting. So what would you like, what's your favorite meal to cook, if you cook, that is, because that's not always compulsory?
It's not, and for me it's fairly sporadic. So my other half does more regular hours. You know, my hours tend to be like 12 to 14 hours a day. So on a day-to-day basis, he does the cooking. But when I cook, the default is Jamaican. So I'm a British-born Jamaican. You know, identity is complex, but that's how I think about it. I'm British-born Jamaican. And so, yeah, rice and peas is a must. My supply of peas is drying up now. Somebody was talking about okra soup. My supply of real peas has dried up. It's distressing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So rice and peas is a must. Alongside anything. But I tend to cook. When I cook, it's an occasion. It's because, you know, we're having people around, or even if it's just the two of us. So rice and peas definitely. Some kind of seasoned chicken. also I live in an area with a lot of Southeast Asians, right? So all of the Indian spices are very readily available. So Indian is a must. And baking is a must as well. Actually, baking is what I'm known for in my family. So when we have our big Christmas dinners, they'll give me a list. They'll be like, okay, we want a rum cake. We also want your orange and white chocolate cake. Yeah, we also want this cake. There'll be like 3 or 4 different cakes. So yeah, I do enjoy cooking and baking and stuff, but it's not an everyday thing. For me.
I don't enjoy cooking. I'm the alcohol person in my family. Okay. It's like, who brings the good wine? She does. That's my own role, not the food, never the food. Or plantain. I can fry plantain. I can cook, I just really enjoy it. But yeah, so it's either I'll bring the wine or the plantain. Like, but I don't think I'll do the whole jollof rice or whatever it is that comes with that. Okay, so the last question before we then get into it is, what is one piece of advice that you heard when you were like, you know, a while back that you just feel like you cannot shake off, that has kind of helped really guide you in your choices?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the comments. Seasoning meat is also very important. Getting distracted. that's a must the day before, if possible. So yeah, in terms of advice, I think a piece of advice that I can't shake off, but that conversely I don't think has been always super helpful, is this idea that one has to work twice as hard to get half as far, you know. And I think that, as I mentioned, like, identity is complex, but for me, I'm Jamaican, so my grandparents were invited here after the Second World War and experienced a lot of stuff. And it was the ethos for that generation, and even for my parents' generation, is that, you know, you need to work hard, you need to keep your head down, you know, and it's going to be more difficult for you to get things, but you know, if you just work hard, then you know your work will speak for itself, your intelligence will speak for itself. And because I was always, my family had and has, you know, lots of confidence in me in terms of being like naturally bright academically and always expecting good things of me. And so the idea was that there's the assumption that they'll be prejudiced, but the advice was that if I work hard enough, then that hard work will be able to overcome the prejudice. Yeah, and so that working hard has been instilled in me for a long time, and there is a large degree to which it has been very helpful. So all across previous teams, previous colleagues, even people who don't like me, the one thing that you cannot say about Danielle is that she doesn't work hard. Absolutely not. There's no basis for saying that, right? But I think that the framing was off, because once, for me, I'll keep it personal. For me, looking at it from that perspective, when you're working hard and you're not seeing the results that you think that you should be seeing, especially after you've acclimatized to a new industry and you know your work is as good or better than your peers, and you're not seeing the results that you think you should be seeing, because I started with that mindset of, okay, I'm going to have to work twice as hard. You think the remedy for not seeing exactly, and ultimately that ends up being unproductive. It ends up being suboptimal for many reasons. One, because you can so easily get out of balance. So I'm married, but I don't have children, right? So there isn't never a natural stop on my day, and my husband is very supportive. Yeah, I can come home 2 o'clock in the morning. It's like as long as you come home, it's fine. He doesn't complain, right? So there's no natural break on my work day. So I've been in many situations where I'm not seeing the results that I expect. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to add this to my portfolio, and I'm going to publish these great notes, and then I'll see the results that I desire. And sometimes that's a solution for problems, but often I have found it's not. And so yes, it's been both a positive and a negative in terms of that mindset of working twice as hard to get half as far. I'd like to say I've overcome it. I've not. I'm now at the point that of realizing that it's suboptimal.
Yeah.
But I'm still here.
I would definitely like to
after my colleagues.
I would definitely like to get more into like that realization. And now that you have that, how are you working differently? Because I think many people on this call, and please type in the chat if that resonates with you. Like a lot of people would have got that advice, like, just work hard, keep your head down, all that type of stuff. But even when you realize like, this may not be necessarily the right way to work, we don't know an alternative. Also not trained to think, but there's just not, no one's coached us on the alternative, right? So I would like to kind of hear like, okay, in hindsight, like, how are you maybe now doing things differently? But okay, we'll come back to that. So now just kind of, this is really, I feel like I know you a lot better now. Just with that, you give us lots of really good nuggets. So you studied psychology at Warwick, and then your first job was like finance. So talk us through like how that worked. I guess like just thinking through like your career options, why finance kind of came up for you, and how did you sort of then end up in equity research?
Yeah, so I mean, with my studies, I really felt like the world was my oyster. I was equally talented in the arts and the sciences. And so the stuff that I chose to study, both at A level and at degree level, was just whatever I thought was interesting, because I didn't feel like I had to specialize in a particular area. And so psychology was just interesting to me, and I really enjoyed studying it. So while my course mates who were studying like really vigorous courses such as like Morse or mechanical engineering or pure maths and whatever, they were kind of struggling through their degree. I really enjoyed it because all of my course material was all really interesting. Right? It was so interesting, and it was a process that I enjoyed. But then when it came to deciding what to do as a career, and I was looking at different avenues, it became clear that, like, to me, if you go into any kind of caring field, whether it's medicine or psychiatry or things like that, it should be a calling. And I don't feel like I had a calling to go into those caring industries, right? I think we've all been to GPs who were just GPs because they think they should be a doctor, and that's, and that's the easiest thing that they can do is to be a GP, right? They don't have that natural caring energy. And so I don't want to be that. And we're just kind of with, within the ACS at Warwick, within the network that I had at Warwick, looking at what other people were choosing to do. And they were all applying to either banking or consultancy, basically. And so I applied during university to do an internship through SEO London, got rejected the first time. And so was almost at the third year, end of my third year of my degree with no role, and applied to the internship the second time around and got an internship working in equity research at UBS. And, obviously, I mean, as you know, like the internships, especially the way they were set up then, now it feels like it's, sorry, excuse me. Now it feels like it's so much more competitive to get into an internship. You already need to demonstrate that's what you want to do forever and ever. Yes. Whereas back then, you
need to know anything.
14 years ago, the expectations in terms of what you would know about the industry were lower. And so it was a real opportunity to be in that environment for 10 weeks and to kind of just see what it was like, and I think that especially because I had a psychology degree, there were definitely, I mean, I'm not speaking out of turn, but the person who was the line manager in the team I interned in told me at the end of the internship, like, oh, I had an idea of what a psychology graduate would be like, and you blew my expectations out of the water, basically. So the expectations were low because I was a psychology grad and I didn't grow up wanting to be an investment banker, but through that period and spending that time in the department, it seemed like actually, this is a really interesting job. It has a really interesting mix of skills. Both that communication piece and also the deep analysis, numerical analysis. So it's a similar thing of balancing both sides in terms of the arts and the sciences, which really resonated with me. and they offered me a role and I took it, so that's how I ended up there.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Oh gosh, that takes me back because we were actually in the same, as it so happens, we were in the same SEO class. We didn't know each other. But her face, actually, when we started planning for this, I was like, I know this face. So I asked the question and she's like, oh, SEO. I was like, oh my God. But yeah, so this was like a good while ago. We always have a few SEO people around. I think Pearl is in the chat. I could see her sort of saying SEO alum. Care, like, yeah, there are lots of, there usually quite a few on most of our events, like, yeah, and that's just the impact that SEO as an organization has had, which is great.
Absolutely.
And so now kind of into like demystifying, like, what is equity research, and what was it about the role that caught your interest and obviously kept it for pretty much, like, you're still pretty much doing that job. So like, yeah, like what like, how do you explain 101 equity research?
Yeah, so essentially equity research, at least at its core, the point of my job is to give advice to people who are managing other people's money on what stocks they should buy. So if essentially all employers have to have a pension fund now. So you invest your money into a pension fund. That pension fund then gives that money to others to manage, and they decide whether they're going to invest in stocks or bonds or alternative assets, and they decide what stocks they're going to buy. And so conventionally, especially on the sell side, so the terminology is, because I'm selling my advice to money managers, we're the sell side. So on the sell side, the way equity research will be organized is that you're split up into pods. So you cover different sectors. And in fact, I've covered a couple of other sectors, which we can get onto. But within the mining space where I sit now, I'm giving advice to a money manager who's managing money on behalf of other people on what mining company they should buy, essentially. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And any particular reason, like, why mining, or is that just sort of where you ended up first and just stayed?
Yeah, so it's a bit of happenstance and a bit of me finding it interesting. So when I joined UBS, I joined in equity research. So as you mentioned, most of my career has been in equity research, but I actually joined doing product management. So I was it's basically the management function of the equity research department. So in the morning, where you would have analysts publishing new notes within equity research, conventionally you would have a morning meeting. So you would talk about those notes to the sales guys, who then have a broader reach to go and talk to lots and lots of different people about your work and to try and sell it to them. And so we would run the morning meeting and do various other more administrative things within the equity research department. So I joined, and essentially that's what I was doing. But that's not what I wanted to do. That's not what I interned doing, where I wanted to be an analyst covering stocks. But the problem was I was really good at product management, right? So that team didn't want me to leave.
Yeah.
And so one of the great things about that role, though, was that I knew all of research and all of sales, because that was my job. And so a junior associate left in the telecoms team within my department. And I was sitting in product management and feeling a bit frustrated, like I want to move, they're not moving me, blah, blah, blah. And so I approached the head of that team where the associate left and said, well, you worked with me before as a product manager. I think I'd be a good analyst. I think you should hire me, basically. So I moved on from product management to cover telecoms. And especially given my background is in accounting or finance, it was a really good sector to start in because I'm biased, obviously.
Yeah.
It's very straightforward. Yeah. Have a bit of regulation, a bit of consumer trends, and basically you can call the stock price for telecoms. Yeah. So I learned how to be an analyst in what is a really simple sector, which I really lucked out on. And so that's how I learned how to be an analyst, 3 statement forecasting and all of these things, and also how to communicate those ideas. So both of those sides. And I was there. I just got to the point where I was really comfortable with the sector, really comfortable with my stocks. I picked up my own stocks. So it was a period of about 18 months. And over this time, the industry was shrinking and indeed continues to shrink. You know, the first day of my graduate program was actually the day that Lehman went bust, right? So the industry has just been shrinking the whole time I've been in it. And so they gave me this role, but then 18 months later, they said, actually, we don't think we need someone in this role anymore. But because they knew me by that time, I'd been in the department like 4 years, and they wanted to keep me in the department, they offered me a role in mining. And unfortunately, there's like zero overlap between telecoms on one hand and mining on the other hand. And so I started from scratch again. So it's learning a new sector and picking up new stocks. And I think the reason that mining has held my interest I've been doing mining since 2012. So like coming up on a decade. The reason it's held my interest is because it's so much more complicated and so much more interesting than any of the other sectors, I think, practically, because there are so many different types of inputs. So on the one hand, there's the really macro stuff, like what is the Fed doing? Where is the global economy going? All of those things kind of affect where commodity prices go. And then you get down to the individual commodities. So for something like gold, and gold is not even strictly supply demand. Gold trades more like a currency. And then you have, things like copper. Well, we need copper in cars and to build power stations and in our fridges and washing machines and so on. And so there are so many different inputs, and then that's just the commodities. And then you get down to this company level. So what does this company's balance sheets look like? Where are their assets? What are their management like? How good have they been in the past in terms of executing M&A deals? And then even below that, there's another layer of detail, which is the opportunity to go and visit these mines, right? Because again, I'm a psychologist, I'm not a geologist. And so in normal times, hopefully things, go back to normal at some point. But in a normal year, probably 2 or 3 of my trips will be going to visit a mine, getting to go to random countries like Ukraine and Kazakhstan and North Macedonia and just random countries wherever there happen to be mines, and like getting to go to the mine site and ask the people at the mine, okay, what does this do? How does this connect? Like, how does it get to the surface? How do you process it and stuff like that? And so all of those different layers of detail, any one of them can affect where a stock goes, either the really macro stuff or the really micro in terms of what's happening in that particular mine. And so there's, from an intellectual perspective, there's such a range of things I can be talking about on a particular day. And so that's what keeps it interesting for me.
Gosh, yeah, that does sound very, very interesting. And obviously being a techie now, I love how easy or simplistic the tech industry can be. So it resonates where you're like, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. This, that, and the other equates. So now, like, having done it, or having started from where you started from, as you say, like no background in finance, in accounting, and all of the things that we think are like core, but an interest, and you kind of develop that through coming in a sort of, I guess, an adjacent team to the team that you're working in. What would you say like are the core skills that someone looking to explore a career in this space should really be honing in on?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is less of a skill and more of a mindset, and that's in terms of curiosity. So wanting to understand how things work, whether that's the intricacies of how a particular accounting rule has changed and how that's going to change reporting, or the intricacies of how the miners get this thing from a lump of rock to some kind of usable metal form. Right. So I think that because I'm still, even having done it for so many years, I'm still in a situation where I'm always having to learn. And I think if that's not a process that I enjoyed, it would get old pretty quickly. I think, to drill down into some more discrete skills, obviously a level of numeracy is really important. But I think that really, if you've done A-level maths, then it's enough. The need to do like long division and complicated multiplication in your head is not important. Like that's why Excel is there. But also, I think also a natural flair for being able to express yourself, especially in equity research, you know. So, and especially because, and I'm sure we'll come onto some of these themes in the future, but especially because I don't have a finance background, I don't have a mining background, and because of what I look like, frankly, there's going to be, or there has been, a naturally high level of skepticism when people start to interact with me from scratch, at least with some people, not with all people, but with some. And so I think on the one hand, really having really robust work, having really robust analysis, where you need those hard skills, you need the numeracy, you need to know what's going on in your sector, but also having a flair for being able to express it. Both of those things are equally important in order to kind of have some longevity in equity research, I would say.
Okay, so I mean, you touched on something very important, and it was on my list of questions, but as you've mentioned it, let's delve in. Which is, you know, yeah, like ultimately, like with research, you're influencing, right? You're influencing how someone thinks about something. And people tend to receive that information better from, you know, those they, you know, have some kind of affinity with, those they like. You know, we talk all the time around the whole know, like, and trust factor, right? And that is built from, in many ways, really starting, the base is always, do I like this person? Do I have something in common? Do I trust their voice? So as you mentioned, like what you look like, and I'm guessing that means female, black, or the whatever else, like whatever other boxes like we want to put ourselves in. How is that? Can you share how you feel that has impacted your ability to influence and maybe perhaps your career progression?
Yeah, and I like that you phrase that separately, because I think they're really separate things, as in the way that it impacts my ability to influence and the impact that it's had on my career, I think have been quite differential. I think in terms of the former, what I found that is, so my maiden name, as a bit of a diversion, right? My maiden name is English because my background is Jamaican, but I've been married for 10 years. And so what that means is that, and my second name is Zimbabwean. So what that means is that when you see my name, you already have an idea of what I look like, or you make an assumption of what I look like, right? And so in terms of, if there are people either consciously or unconsciously who wouldn't want to hear from a Black woman, a lot of that is filtered out.
Yeah.
Because they just choose not to interact with me, right? And I don't necessarily see that as a negative. It's saving me a lot of headache, you know. But that's the glib side of it. I think that ultimately, even if people, if for people whose level of prejudice is not that high, right? So they're willing to interact with somebody whose name is Danielle Chigumira, right? There can still be a high level of skepticism just because they don't know me.
Yeah.
You know? And so what I found is that there are a few strategies that I've used over time that I found have been impactful. One is being consistent, right? So what people really prize, at least what the buy side prizes in terms of equity research, is just a weight of experience. It's just knowing your sector. So if something random happens, they can call you and you can put it in context with them and give them an idea of how it might affect different commodities, different stocks, etc. And so I think that, especially now, having covered the sector for several years, that consistency of publishing robust research means that even people who wouldn't speak to me at year 2, now, you know, at year 5 and definitely at year 9, are more open to speaking to me. And so there is definitely a sense in which I've just kind of had to grind through, and then over time I've accumulated more people who are willing to listen to my voice.
Right.
But I think the other thing that has had, so that's kind of like the hard grind. The thing that's really leveraged that's had like the multiplier effect, is me working out what my value is, even relative to all of my competitors, who all, unfortunately, all look different from me, right? And so for me, part of that has been the focus on ESG. And we can talk about that in a bit of detail. But also part of it is knowing that, okay, what kind of analyst do I want to be? There are 20 analysts covering a lot of the stocks that I look at. There are 20 analysts covering them. So I can't just be delivering the same content in the same way as my competitors and expect to be more successful than them. I need to be delivering something different. So either I'm the first one to update my numbers, or I give you really good insight in terms of how management teams are thinking. Or now in the past 3 years, it's been, I really integrate ESG from the bottom up. And that's what investors are having to do anyway. And that's what my competitors aren't doing as robustly.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's a two. There's a hard grind, which is the earlier part of my career. And there's now being in a position to really strategize on how I differentiate myself versus my competitors. And that's where I've seen like the biggest bang for my buck. You know?
Yeah. So I guess I'll probably paraphrase that into saying, one was like, in terms of being able to influence, or you felt like you could increase your influences around technical competence, but then also having a very unique proposition that made you.
Absolutely.
But doesn't that then again just come back to like the conversation we're having earlier about working twice as hard? Because Kelly will get the benefit of the doubt because her surname is not Chigumira,
Yeah.
And I'm sure if I asked, like, did you ever at any point consider just not changing your last name and actually just keeping your Anglo-Saxon last name?
Yeah. And I think it's a useful transition into how it's impacted my career, because I've found that, and part of this is talking my own book, but that's my job, right? I found that the track record that I have in terms of influencing people and giving them valuable advice far surpasses the trajectory that I've seen in my career in terms of how senior I've got and how quickly and how much I've been paid. Yeah. So to me, they're, especially over the past 4 years or so, they've gone, one has continuously increased. So I really felt my value and got the feedback, right, that actually people really value my advice, but also it's not been reflected in how quickly I've got more senior.
Right.
It's not translated over, right? And so I think it's worth being frank that has been and continues to be a source of frustration. I think that the way that I'm trying to deal with it is that, firstly, the reality is that I'm not going to be given the benefit of the doubt, the same benefit of the doubt as a John Smith, right? And in a career progression context. And because even though I feel like I've already won the battle and I'm winning the battle with my clients, there is a whole nother infrastructure which is internal that you have to win in order to be promoted and become more successful and be paid, frankly. And so I think what I have grappled with in the past is, what is more important to me? Is it more important to feel like I'm doing my job really well and I have really strong client relationships and that is all humming? Or is it more important to be a good political operator and have that be reflected in my title and my pay? And I think that because I've put more emphasis on the former than the latter, it's a bit easier to make peace with the fact that actually you guys should be paying me more, I should be more senior than I am, that kind of thing. But I think ultimately the organizations that we work for are motivated by results. And so one of the things that's also impacted my ability to get more senior in the past 4 years is the fact that since 2017, I've had 4 different roles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can come on to that detail at different companies. Yeah. And so I think that now that I feel like my client impact is humming, it is a matter of time before it's reflected in terms of my career trajectory again, in terms of getting more senior. And so, yeah, I guess that's how I think about it. But to be frank, I do feel like if I was a different identity, then my trajectory would have been different. You know, but the reality is I'm the identity that I am.
Yeah.
You know, and I was raised, my Jamaican mum is like super Pan-African, like was woke before the term was trendy, you know. And so, you know, I was a person, the 9 years I was at UBS, I had locks, right? So it just is superficial, but it's a demonstration that I'm comfortable in my own skin, and my journey is what it is. And I always joke that there was a meme that I saw like maybe 3 years ago when I was going through a really challenging period in my career. And like the gist of it was basically like, sometimes I just think, F it, I'll be a stripper. And then I remember that I'm fat and I can't dance. Right. But so it's kind of getting at that because of our identities, it's likely that we face differential headwinds compared to other people.
Yeah.
So even if I decide today, like I'm tired of these people, I want to go and work at Tesco, I will still have the supervisor at Tesco will have the same issues that my supervisor at work has with me now. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. There isn't, so I might as well do the thing that motivates me, that I find really intellectually stimulating, that I really enjoy, rather than try and find an environment that will be easier for me. Yeah. You know?
Would you see that changing?
You know, I
appreciate like acceptance and I'm all about like, it is what it is. Like most people hear me say like, well, it is what it is. I'm just gonna do me regardless, and not let, you know, whatever limitations are coming, I'm just gonna do my own thing. But is there a world that you imagine where this is not a thing, where like my impact and my influence actually makes a difference in my progression?
Yeah, I think that the real answer is that I hope so. And I think that's one of the real things that even just over the past couple of years that have changed for me personally. And part of the way that I now show up authentically is about not being scared to speak up about these kind of things. You know, so in a previous role, not this one, but in a previous role where we were hiring for an associate, and there was a progression of, frankly, white males with all the same backgrounds coming through interviews, I was like, well, you know, if you were interviewing me, I wouldn't get through your criteria. Yeah. And the person is less senior than me. So there's something wrong with the way that you guys are filtering these CVs for people to all look the same. You know, whereas definitely 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said anything at all. My mouth would have been zipped. You know, and so I think that in as much as it's not fair that a lot of that closet D&I work falls on us who are of different identities, I think that ultimately I am in the position that I'm in, maybe not as senior as I think I should be, as we've established, but I'm in the position that I'm in, and even within that position I can have some influence. So I will speak up about stuff like that. I'm on the D&I council at my role, at my current role, and I will say, like, you know, because we all have our different buckets in terms of areas in diversity and inclusion that we're trying to influence, and in that remit, I will say, like, well, I don't want to get to too specific things, but I'll be very frank and open in terms of what my views are. Yeah. Like, you guys say you want differential results, but you're not changing the process that got you the undesirable results. Yeah. So don't you think you should change? Right. And so saying that to say, I think that, you know, that especially that mindset of just keeping your head down and working, that's one of the ways in which I've definitely changed that, because I'm now willing to put my head above the parapet, because now my view is I stand out anyway,
Yeah,
you know,
might as well.
so I might as well use my voice, yeah, and you know, hopefully it has some impact. And I think that, you know, it can't just be us speaking up about those kind of things. We need allies, like real allies. But I'm more willing to do that work now than I have been in the past, and hopefully over time that helps as well.
Yeah, yeah. So you spent 9 years at UBS. What was that moment where you're like, okay, I'm leaving? And then how have you then transitioned? Like you mentioned, you did like 4 roles. So it's been obviously a lot after having the stable time and one firm, and then you moved, and it's like, you know, yeah. So how's that thought process, and I guess that sort of action step been like for you?
Yeah, so I'll talk about how it was, and then probably how it should have been, which is quite different. So within UBS, I think part of the reason that I ended up staying there so long, I mean, it's a great house. It has a great name for equities, for equity research, right? So it's not necessarily a lazy place to stay. But because I had so many different roles, it took me being in the same role for a period of years for me to realize that no, actually, it's not me, it's them. And so getting to the point where actually I was starting to feel like super comfortable in my ability to do my role and to deliver good advice, and seeing the where I did have opportunities for those client interactions, seeing how well I could convert those initial conversations to strong relationships. And then also seeing how, from a structural perspective, my ability to go in and be as successful as the people, you know, the next rung above me was structurally, it was stymied structurally. Yeah, because of these specific responsibilities that I was given, there was literally no way that I would have got to the next level with those current responsibilities. And so I was in a really particular position where I was covering more companies than my peers. I was traveling between, I covered half European companies and half South African companies. I was spending like 2 months a year in South Africa, so like doing way more travel than even my peers, and naturally feeling a bit burnt out, and so I was naturally susceptible when to offers essentially. And so I think that that this satisfaction had been building for a couple of years. But I think if I was more proactive about saying, okay, how specifically do I want to address this? How do I want to reposition myself? And like, what's the best next step? Then I would have taken some time to think more comprehensively about that next step and the specific setup that I wanted, and the specific, you know, range of responsibilities and the amount of support that I wanted in that next step, rather than thinking like, okay, and it wasn't a negative move at the time, but it was more reactive than proactive. Right. Absolutely.
So it's like, I wasn't
and
happy.
So
offers are coming,
yeah,
they're paying more, I'm out of here.
Yeah. And it was, and at the time, it seemed like such a clear choice, because I was working 15-hour days at that time. Yeah, spending 3 months a year away from home, constantly at Heathrow. And I'm the other side of London. I'm east of London, right? So constantly traveling back and forth, and it being clear that actually I was being paid less and whatever. And so the trade body that approached me for platinum was part of my portfolio at the time, and so it seemed really seductive, the idea of going from talking about 20 different commodities and 30 different companies to just being able to talk about one thing and feel like I'm the expert in the one thing. And I didn't have to take a pay cut, and I went from 15-hour days to an 8-hour day, you know. So at the time, it seemed like a no-brainer.
Yeah, because per hour, you were working less.
Like my pay probably doubled per hour, right? So it seemed like a no-brainer. But I think ultimately, in trying to resolve those pain points, I went from one extreme to another in terms of my intellectual stimulation, because I didn't realize how much I would miss sitting on a desk with other people who do a similar role to you, where there is so much intellectual stimulation, there's so much intellectual rigor. You know, there's a culture of excellence, right? And you're working to everyone, you're working amongst people who all hold themselves at a high standard, to an organization where you're the one person doing your role, and there isn't the same capacity to bounce ideas off of people. There isn't the same common concept of what the end product should look like, right? And ultimately end up being from one extreme to the other. Ultimately, the pain point for the trade body was that essentially I felt like I was sacrificing my intellectual integrity, yeah, which for somebody who lives on their opinion was like a bridge too far. And so I resigned from that role without having another role. So I said, I'm just going to resign and I'm going to look for something else. And so, but it was a really valuable time, because having all of that stuff stripped away. So the investment banking career had been stripped away already. And then even my job, even though I left it, right, the job was no longer there. And so I had to really think at that point. It gave me the opportunity to think strategically about, okay, what exactly about a role that I like? What is it about a role that I don't like? What can I live with? What can I not? You know, and so ultimately I ended up coming back to the sales side. So doing, you know, similar role to what I was doing before and similar to what I'm doing now, but with a portfolio that made sense, with a balance of opportunities that made sense, with responsibilities that made sense, and with a team that bought into me and my ability to deliver. And unfortunately, because it was a shorter span, but that role was probably one of my best roles, because it was one that I had the opportunity to go into strategically rather than reactively. What happened with that role is that ultimately they decided to close the equities business. So I was made redundant alongside 200 of my colleagues, and that was back in November 2019. And so that put me in a position of, again, being slightly on the back foot in terms of looking for the next role, but having gone through that process once in terms of thinking strategically, what do I want? What do I not want? I was really in a position to kind of hold my ground and not just take the next thing. So much to the distress of my family, I was made redundant in November. By December, I had another job offer. But I decided it wasn't quite the right platform for me and I didn't take it.
Right.
And everybody was like, "Oh, Danielle, you are not serious. How can you not take this role and you don't have another one in the bag?" But I knew, having had that experience, 2 roles before, being in the trade body, I knew the kind of distress I would feel if I didn't feel like the role was the right platform for me. So it's like, okay, I'd rather continue to look. And then the pandemic happened in the middle, right? So it was poor timing from that perspective. But ultimately, me having the peace of mind in terms of having the role structured in a way that I know works for me was more important than just having a role. And part of that is privilege as well, right? So we're 2 able-bodied people in our marriage. We don't have children. We don't have like a high fixed cost base. So I had that flexibility to say, okay, well, even if it takes another 6 months, then I'd rather get the right role than just to get the next role.
I was gonna ask about that. Like, did maybe perhaps your financial situation kind of contribute to you being able to say, well, yeah, this is not really for me yet, versus like, if say things were a lot more desperate, you might have just been like, yep, well, we need food on the table. Your choices maybe might be more limited.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's partly a privilege because of the kind of role that I'd done. And it's also partly strategic because between the 2 of us, I've spoken about my husband a lot, but between the 2 of us, he's much more risk averse, right? So when we bought a house, we bought a relatively small house. We don't need a big house anyway because there's only 2 of us. And we had always had mortgage protection insurance. And so I knew that at least during the time I was, and because I'd been made redundant, I knew that the mortgage was paid. And so that was a massive amount of flexibility that I wouldn't have otherwise had. And then also like almost continuously working for 11 years, the time up to then, you know, that naturally gave me a bit more financial flexibility.
Yeah.
And so if I was in a different financial situation, I may well have made a different decision. I mean, it would have been the right decision, but given I had that flexibility, yeah, I thought may as well leverage it.
Yeah. No, I love the way you frame that journey, because it was not just like, okay, you know, we always talk about mobility and just moving, but it's like, okay, well, what's the right way to approach, you know, potentially making a move out of whatever it is that you're doing, right? It's not, so, you know, being reactive can be cool, but then you might just end up in like the complete other side. And I was watching something on Instagram today where like this lady was talking about like you really need to identify per time what it is you like and don't like about the role that you're in. And I think a lot of times we tend to like we grandize a lot, so we kind of just say, oh, I'm just not happy, but actually no, like stop for a minute, what exactly are you not happy about? And those are like two different questions. You get it into like the really like I like the people I work with, you know, but I don't like the hours, and I don't like, so you can then identify what needs to change rather than just changing location and then finding, oh my god, I've just swung the other way completely.
Yeah.
You have to like redress and all that type of stuff. So I think that was like really, 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 really good advice. Yeah, just that actually made me think a lot. So we are coming to like, in fact, we've just crossed the top of the hour, guys. So if you have, I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but let me know if I've missed any. If there are any questions, please type. We're going to start wrapping up now so we can give Danielle her evening back, and so on and so forth. And so then how do you, I think whilst you're just waiting for any questions to gather, my one for you would then be like, what has been, how do I phrase this? Like, what is this, like, through all of this now, what is the one, maybe not one, however you feel, however many you feel, sort of key lessons that you wish, like, oh wow, I wish someone had told me that at the start of my career, but then now I'm glad, like, I know that now.
Yeah, I think one of them we touched on at the beginning is that
advice,
like, work hard but don't work twice as hard. Don't work twice as hard. You know, put your, don't assume that your hard work is naturally going to result in the career trajectory that you would like. And be proactive in terms of addressing your career path. You know, probably if you're on such a forum, you're already doing that. But me, it took me a strong 6 years to really realize that.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is to trust yourself. You know, people talk a lot about imposter syndrome, and my personal view is like, lean-in feminism is a scam, and you don't ever really get rid of imposter syndrome. Right, but I think that the two things can coexist. Like, if you really feel like something is wrong, if you feel like an opportunity is not the right one for you, if you really feel like you know, this environment isn't healthy for you, then that's important data.
Yeah.
You know, even if you can't always put your finger on it. Likewise, in terms of when it comes to building up a network of people around you, if you feel like there's just somebody that you click with, if you feel like you sparked with somebody, lean into that. You know, I think especially because I do such a, in theory, analytical role, you can kind of put your gut feeling and your gut feeling to the side, and try to approach everything from a very analytical standpoint. But your intuition is really important. It's like all of those subconscious things, subconsciously you're processing data all the time. And sometimes you might not be able to articulate why something feels wrong or why something feels right. But lean into that, don't dismiss it, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. Intuition. Those who know me know, like, I'm a huge intuition fan. I'm always like, this is what I see, or this is how I feel. It's like But yeah, but really thinking about our feelings as data. That's like, yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. I think it's actually, yeah, you say you're super analytical. You're just like, this is what's in front of me. I've got bills. If 1+1 = this is how all of this will work. But if you just paused and thought, how does this make me feel? And really thought about that as critical data, we might all be making very different choices. Let me think about that one. I think that one was for me. So I see a question here from Tamara, maybe a clarification question. I think she was saying, can you please summarize again the other skills you leverage after coming to the realization that hard work alone is not enough? Great question.
Yeah, so I would say the biggest difference in terms of leveraging my skills was really drilling down into how do I differentiate myself versus my peers. So I'm assuming that the core skills to do your core role, you've already done because you've been focusing on hard work up until now. But it's really what made the biggest difference to me is being a bit strategic in terms of how I differentiate myself versus my peers. And especially after you've done your role for a while, you'll have a bit of a feeling about that. And that's the kind of thing that you should lean into and talk loudly about, and really direct your efforts towards. That's rather what worked for me.
Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe I'll add to that, maybe like leveraging your relationships more. Could be one things I find, like we maybe naturally tend to shy away from relationships because I think a lot of us, especially at work, we feel like we don't naturally click with a lot of people. We don't necessarily play sports. We don't necessarily get drunk at the pub. Weekends might be about church, and the way like what is real for us, like with life, it could be quite different to a lot of people that we're surrounded by, and so maybe relationships just don't feel as organic. But I've definitely found, like, as Danielle said, like if you find relationships that are clicking, like just lean into those, and not in a way that is just about like getting something out of those relationships, but actually making them mutually beneficial and authentic. And then, like I've kind of found like those have helped, but I'm still very much in the trap of, working hard. I think, or just working harder. But I think for me, for sure, it's about, the big change for me has been about talking about the work that I do. Actively talking about the work that I do, like taking my work on road shows and that type of thing. So not just doing the work and submitting it, but actually like, no, I did the work. Can you see that I did the work? Let me tell you how this work is going to help you. So that has been a huge change for me. So I literally put my work on road shows now. And in every sphere, I'm like, okay, yeah, let's go. This is what I'm doing. Hopefully that helps. Okay. And I think there's a question of how can we connect with Danielle outside of viSHEbility? Why do you want to connect with her outside of viSHEbility? Like she's in the chat room. Oh. Anyway, how can they connect?
I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm sure I'm the only Danielle Chigumira on LinkedIn.
She is,
and I'm a compulsive LinkedIn user, so you can.
Oh, really? I noticed that when I met you today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right back, I was like, oh, this is a girl after my own heart. Like I feel like LinkedIn is like chat room.
Yeah.
On there.
Yeah. There's even some stuff to do with my job. I see it first on LinkedIn before I even see it in my emails. Like, yeah, I'm always on there. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. So guys, there's your answer. I don't see any other questions. Let me know. We're wrapping up. But no, Danielle, thank you so much for the time. I mean, honestly, this has probably been one of the realest conversations that I think we've had here, because very few people would like come in and just say, look, this is what happened, but this is probably what could have been done better. And this is how I felt in a specific situation and all of that. So I'm really, really thankful for just your openness and your authenticity. I think people gained a lot out of that, even me specifically. But I told you, like, this conversation was really for me and not really for the women, I allowed them just participate in the conversation.
You let them in.
You were having. I don't know what they were doing.
Okay.
But, we were talking.
Okay, no problem. Well, thank you. It's been really interesting to talk, and I get frustrated about how people gloss over their career successes.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's my natural propensity to be blunt, but I think that's, especially in the realm of our career, it's okay to admit where you failed and where you messed up, and the fact that things aren't always easy, even after doing the same role for several years. So yeah, absolutely. I think we need both, right? We need the positivity mantras, and we need the real as well. So hopefully something for everyone.
Yeah, and life is just not a highlight reel. And I think especially with social media, where we're just constantly like posting all the good stuff, and it's just like everything is like an Instagram. You just realize that's not really real. And someone said to me the other day, like, if you want to impress, tell people about your wins. But if you want to impact, if you want to influence people, really tell them what didn't go well. That's really how you start, that sort of authentic wheel of change. So we all get so used to just talking about what has gone well, but actually, is that really as impactful than just like where could something have been different? Where have I exerted a lot more energy than I should have, and I've now in hindsight, I'm doing something different, and I think that's where like the magic really happens. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, it's been great.
So virtual claps, guys, you know how we do on here, like, we do virtual claps until we can get everyone in the room and actually clap live. But actually, if you don't mind unmuting yourselves and actually giving Danielle a phenomenal hand clap.
Fabulous.
Excellent. So no virtual claps today, real claps. That's what we're doing. I like it, but thank you so much. I appreciate it. And yeah, so guys, join us on the next career conversation. I don't know who's up. I don't actually know who we're doing next, but we'll figure it out. We'll let you know. And it's always great to host these and, get to see so many people. And I hope you guys find it really, really helpful. Yeah, and like, whoever you feel like would benefit from this conversation, like feel free to share it with them. It will always be on our website. It's freely available to see. But that's the point. We're not going to have 100 people on these calls, but we can have an exponential impact if everyone kind of shared it with someone in their world who we think would really benefit from some of the wisdom that was shared here today. So I know I've taken a lot out of it, and I hope you guys have too. So with that, thank you, and have a fantastic night, everyone.
Thank you both. Bye.
Bye.